Hello friends, welcome to the Viva Voce of Anatomy. Today we discuss ribs. The ribs are 12 pair in number. They are 12 on the each side, forming the major part of the thoracic cage. First we classify the rib. Ribs are classified into three types. The first, depending on how it articulate with the sternum, they are of two types, true ribs and the false rib. True ribs are the ribs which are articulate anteriorly directly with the sternum with their own costal cartilage. The first to seventh rib are true ribs, and the remaining lower fifth rib are a false rib. Means they will not directly articulate with the sternum or not at all articulate with the sternum. So they are the false rib. Lower five rib, that is 8 to 12, are a false rib. Now the second classification according to their articulation. Now the rib is having two ends, anterior and the posterior, both are articular. Now the posteriorly, all the 12 rib articulate with the thoracic vertebra. Anteriorly, the upper seventh rib, first to seventh rib, articulate directly with the sternum through their own costal cartilage. So these ribs are known as a vertebrosternal ribs. First to seven ribs are the vertebro-seven. Now the second subtype, according to the articulation, vertebrochondral rib. Vertebrochondral means the posteriorly it is articulate with vertebra, thoracic vertebra. Anteriorly, their costal cartilage articulate with the costal cartilage of a next higher rib. So the rib number 8, 9 and the 10 are a vertebrochondral ribs. And the last two ribs, 11 and the 12, are called the vertebral ribs. They are the vertebral ribs. Means they are articulate posteriorly only with the thoracic vertebra and their anterior ends are free. So they are called a vertebral ribs, or you can say them as a floating ribs. So this is a classification according to the articulation. And the last third classification is according to their feature. So there are two types, the typical ribs and the atypical ribs. Typical ribs means their feature are more or less similar. Rib number 3 to 9 are a typical rib, whereas the first, second, 10, 11, 12 are a atypical rib. Now we will discuss the rib according to the feature. First the typical rib, but before that some general feature of the rib. The length of the rib is gradually increased from the first rib up to the seventh, and then onwards the length will decrease. So the seventh rib is a longest rib in the 12th rib. Second, the ribs lies obliquely in the adults, and this obliquity is increased up to the ninth rib. So the ninth rib is a most oblique rib. Now next, the position of the rib in the infant. The child less than the 1 year, the position of the rib is horizontal. And gradually the posterior end, as the child will grow, the posterior end will grow upward, so the rib will become oblique like this. So in the children, because of the horizontal position of the rib, its breathing will be the abdominothoracic, whereas in the adult, the breathing respiration will be thoraco-abdominal. Now we see the feature of a typical rib. Right now in my hand, this is the one of the typical rib, that is the number 3 to 9. The typical rib is having the two ends. One end is anterior and the second is a posterior, and in between there is a flattened side. The anterior end presents the large concave facet for articulation with the costal cartilage of its own rib. The posterior end is having three parts: head, neck, and the tubercles. First we see the head. You can see here the head presents a two facet, upper smaller and lower larger. This two facet is separated by one faint crest. Okay. So this lower larger facet articulate with the side of the body of the same corresponding thoracic vertebrae, and the upper facet articulate with the side of the body of a next higher thoracic vertebrae. Means if, for example, if it is a fifth rib, then this lower facet of the fifth rib articulate with the side of the body of the fifth thoracic vertebrae, and the upper facet articulate with the side of the body of the fourth thoracic vertebrae. So this is the head. Next is a neck. Neck is flattened anterior-posteriorly when placed in the anatomical position. So it is having the smooth anterior surface, rough posterior surface, the sharp superior border, which is known as the crest of the neck, and the rounded lower border. So this is a neck of a rib. The next part in the posterior end is a tubercle. The tubercle lies on the outer surface of the rib at the junction of the neck and the shaft. Now the tubercle is having two parts, the medial articular part and lateral non-articular part. Medial articular part articulate with the tip of the transverse process of the corresponding same numerical thoracic vertebra and form the costo-transverse joint. And this lateral non-articular part is smaller than the medial articular part. So this is about the posterior end. Now we move to the shaft. The shaft is flattened from the side to side, so it is having outer surface, inner surface, upper border and the lower border. The shaft is having the convexity facing outwards. It is bent at angle which lies around the 5 cm lateral to the tubercle. This is known as the angle of the rib, and from this angle also the shaft is somewhat twisted. Now we see the feature on the outer surface of the rib. On the angle, it is marked by an oblique ridge which is directed downward and the forward. Feature on the inner surface is a smooth and it is lies in the direct contact with the pleura. Here in the middle part, you can see one ridge. Below the middle part, there is a ridge which is continuous posteriorly with the lower border of the neck. Now between this ridge and the lower border of the shaft, there is one groove. This groove is known as a costal groove. This costal groove, remember, it lodges the posterior intercostal vessels and a intercostal nerve. Now the upper border is thick and it is having the distinct inner lip and the outer lip, whereas the lower border is sharp. So these are the feature of a typical rib number 3 to 9. Now we see the side determination of a typical rib. The anterior end present the concave facet for the costal cartilage. The posterior end contains the head, neck and the tubercle. The shaft is having a convexity facing outwards, and the inner surface of the shaft present a costal groove in its lower part. So on the inner surface, you should fill the costal groove with your finger in the lower part of the rib and keeping this anterior and posterior end in its position. So this is a rib of a right side. Now we see the attachment of a rib. Starting from the posterior end over the head. Head anteriorly here provides the attachment of a radial ligament. The crest of a head provides the attachment of an intra-articular ligament of a costo-vertebral joint. Now the neck, anteriorly it is related to the pleura. Posterior surface, rough posterior surface provides the attachment of inferior costo-transverse ligament. The crest of the neck or the superior border provides the attachment of two lamina of a superior costo-transverse ligament. Next, tubercle, lateral non-articular tubercle or a lateral non-articular part provides the attachment of lateral costotalmus ligament. So these are the attachment of a posterior end. Now that of the shaft. Now anteriorly, 5 centimeter behind the anterior end, here you can see one line, oblique line. This is known as the anterior angle of the rib. Now the anterior angle of the rib separate the attachment of external oblique and the serratus anterior in case of 5 to 8 rib, and it separates the attachment of external oblique and latissimus dorsi in case of the 9th and the 10th rib. Now on the inner surface, the floor of the costal groove gives origin of an internal intercostal muscle. Middle 2/4 of a ridge above the costal groove give origin to the intercostalis intimi muscle. Now the upper border of a shaft provides the attachment of an external intercostal muscle on the outer lip, followed by the internal intercostal muscle on the inner side, and most inner side on the inner lip there is an attachment of intercostalis intimi muscle. So this is all about a typical rib. Thank you.
If you like this video, like it and share with your friends. And to get the regular update on the anatomy videos, please subscribe to our channel and click on the bell icon.